Season 4. This episode is entitled What We Water Grows. Have you ever noticed that weeds don't need encouragement? Like, no encouragement at all. They don't need water, they don't need sunlight. They are just going to do what weeds do. They don't need motivation, they don't need a vision board, they don't need a coach, they don't need accountability. You don't have to wake up every morning and remind weeds to grow because they just do. Because growth follows attention, growth follows nourishment, growth follows what gets watered. And it started to make me wonder, what in my life am I unintentionally watering? Am I watering peace or anxiety? Am I watering gratitude or resentment? Am I watering purpose or distraction? And as we continue walking the garden today, we're exploring a simple truth. What we water grows. Hey y'all, I'm Madison Samone Chase, also known as Miss Chase. I was raised in church, and my faith journey has always been at the center of who I am. And I am incredibly thankful to have been raised by a hardworking, sacrificial, high performing single mother who remains my biggest fan and my forever bestie BFF. Honoring God through service, making my mama proud, and using the gifts He gave me has always been deeply important to me. And over the past several seasons of Cut to the Chase at 8, now C2TC8 H.E.R Circle, we've talked about awareness, detox, discernment, boundaries, rebuilding, and becoming. But as I entered this season, I found myself thinking less about what needed to be removed and more about what needed to be cultivated. Because before a gardener plants for the next season, they walk the garden. They take inventory. They notice what's flourishing. They notice what struggled. They notice what produced fruit. And they notice what never took root. They notice what needs pruning. And they notice what has completed its purpose. And that's what season 4 is all about, walking the garden. And taking an honest look at the people, places, and things in our lives, not with judgment, not with shame, but with wisdom. Because every person, every place, and everything produces fruit. And before we ask for a bigger harvest, we may need to take a closer look at the roots. So whether you're a high-performing mother, high-performing single mother, caretaker, entrepreneur, aspiring entrepreneur, working a 9 to 5, juggling multiple jobs, quietly rebuilding, or simply trying to grow through life one season, one day, 1 minute, 1 second at a time, this space in this circle is for you. So if you're listening and or watching, pull up a real chair or a digital chair and grab yourself a cup of hot or cold herbal tea, and welcome to my cozy home of Cut to the Chase at 8, now C2TC8 H.E.R Circle. It is a 15-minute micro-learning moment for macro-living transformations. And I am truly overjoyed that you are here, because this is where we explore life together through our lived experiences, yours and mine, while giving ourselves real grace in this space as we navigate some really interesting times. And here we talk about spirit, mind, and body health, because our health is truly our wealth in microdoses for macro living. So make sure you join me twice daily for just 15 minutes at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. because this is your daily pause for a cause, for clarity, wellness, discernment, grace, healing, intentional decision making, stewardship, and growth, because how we start our day and how we end it matters. And each episode, my offer to you is 3 keys and 1 reflective question. And my prayer is that it's something practical, something grounded, and something you could carry with you long after this episode ends. So wherever you're listening from, I want you to turn it up and tune in. And if anything you hear today pricks your heart or lights a spark, I'd love for you to subscribe and share this episode with someone you care about. Leave a comment so that this episode becomes a dialogue and not a monologue. And leave a 5-star review so that this space can continue to grow and serve others. Let's take 1 breath together. We're going to inhale for 3, 2, 1. Exhale for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. One of the biggest misconceptions about growth is that growth is always intentional. Growth, it isn't intentional. It isn't always intentional. And some of the things growing fastest in our lives are the things we never intended to cultivate. Worry grows, resentment grows, bitterness grows, fear grows, people pleasing grows, overcommitment grows, and often they grow because we keep watering them with our attention. The truth is, attention is a form of water. What we repeatedly focus on, feed, revisit, rehearse, justify, protect, and prioritize tends to expand. And that's true in gardens. And it's also true in life. Gardeners understand that every season requires choices. And not everything can receive the same amount of water. And not everything deserves the same amount of energy. And not everything belongs in the garden. And neither does everything belong in our lives. Which brings me to the PPT audit. People. What or who am I watering? Who receives my attention, my energy, my prayers, my encouragement, my financial and emotional investment, my resources? Because people and places and things that you've done and your experiences in life, those are your resources as well. And is the fruit healthy? Places. What environments am I consistently investing in? Do they help me grow? Or are they stumping me? Or are they reinforcing habits and mindsets I've outgrown? Things. What routines am I watering? What thoughts am I watering? What commitments am I watering? What goals am I watering? Because every investment produces something. And the question is, what? Which brings me to the spontaneous, assertive communication challenge, or the spontaneous, assertive, authentic communication challenge. This week's SAC challenge is simple. Identify one area where your energy and your values are no longer aligned. Then communicate honestly. And maybe that conversation sounds something like this. Maybe that conversation is with someone else. Maybe that conversation is with yourself. And maybe it's finally admitted, this isn't where I want to keep investing my energy. No blame, no drama, no guilt, just honesty. Which brings me to the 3 keys. Key number 1. You don't have to intend for something to grow in order for it to grow. Most people assume that if they didn't choose it, they didn't cultivate it, but that's not always true. Worry rarely begins as a goal. Resentment rarely begins as a plan. People pleasing rarely begin as a lifelong mission, yet all of them can grow. Why? Because growth doesn't always require intention. Sometimes it simply requires attention. The things we repeatedly think about, talk about, revisit, and rehearse often become stronger whether we wanted them to or not. And that's why awareness matters. Because before we can change what we're growing, we have to recognize what we're watering. Which brings me to key number 2. Every yes is water. Every commitment, every conversation, every habit, every thought, every relationship, every place we spend our time, every time we revisit the same worry, every time we replay the same hurt, every time we say yes when we really mean no, we're pouring something into something. The question isn't simply, what am I doing? The deeper question is, what am I feeding? Because whatever consistently receives our time, attention, energy, and focus will usually become stronger, whether it's helping us or hurting us, which brings me to key number 3. Healthy gardens require both watering and withholding the water. Gardeners don't water every plant equally, and they certainly don't water weeds on purpose. They understand that stewardship requires discernment. Discernment and discerning, like it's an action. ING. And some things need more attention. Some things need less attention. And some things need to stop receiving water altogether. And the same is true in our lives. Not every opportunity deserves a yes. Not every relationship deserves unlimited access. Not every thought, desires, or anything that we think about does it deserve to be entertained. And not every obligation deserves to remain on the calendar. Sometimes our growth happens because we nurture something. Other times, our growth happens because we finally stop feeding what no longer belongs. And sometimes the most powerful decision isn't where you give your energy, it's where you stop giving it. Our one reflective question: what am I consistently watering that I no longer want growing in my life? A gardener doesn't just pay attention to what's growing, a gardener pays attention to what it's feeding because growth isn't always a sign of health. Sometimes growth is simply evidence of attention. So this week, before asking what needs to change, I want you to ask yourself, what have I been watering? And is it producing the fruit I actually want? Because what we water grows. What we water grows. And not because growth is always intentional, but because attention is powerful. And every day, through our thoughts, our conversations, our commitments, our habits, and our priorities, we're watering something: peace or panic, gratitude or resentment, purpose or distraction. The question isn't whether something is growing. The question is what? So before we ask why certain things keep showing up in our lives or certain kinds of people keep showing up in our lives, let's take a clear look at what we've been feeding. And as we move through this week, pay attention to where our energy is going. Pay attention to what repeatedly receives our focus. Pay attention to what we're nourishing with our thoughts, our time, our conversations, our commitment, and our money. Remember, gardeners don't just pay attention to what's growing, they pay attention to what they're watering. So continue giving yourself lots of grace in this space. And let's take this closing breath together. We're going to inhale for 3, 2, 1. Exhale for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If this episode pricked your heart or lit a spark, please subscribe and share this podcast with someone you care about. And please leave a 5-star review so that we can continue to grow Her Circle, C2TC8 H.E.R Circle, which stands for High Performing Empowered Women Ready to Thrive. Until next time, I'm Madison Samone Chase, and this has been Cut to the Chase at 8, C2TC8 H.E.R Circle, a 15-minute micro-learning moment for macro-living transformations. Blessings to you and yours. And remember, what you water today becomes the harvest you live with tomorrow.